I'm very pleased to be here with Julie Helmrich. Julie has been part of my world, I don't know, 7 years, something like that. Julie
Yeah.
is, she's someone I think of as the Jeff Whisperer. In my work, I've gotten to meet just a lot of amazing people, and there's about 3 of them that just are just so transformational in what they brought to my life that I can't even express it in words. And so, Julie, your business is Iron Psych. You have a lengthy history as psychologist, psychiatrist,
Psychologist, yeah.
Psychologist. Lengthy. You spent thousands and thousands of hours in therapy or in counseling. I'm saying, I'm saying all the wrong words, but I'm sure people are starting to understand. And Julie has a real specialty in working with entrepreneurs. And one of the fun things is that I love story, and I love using stories in my business and in my marketing. I love telling stories. I love listening to stories. A lot of Julie's work is based on stories we tell ourselves as human beings, as entrepreneurs, and the stories that we're telling ourselves about ourselves often do not serve us that well. So, Julie, welcome. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit just about narrative and our inner stories and our inner narrative as entrepreneurs?
Yeah. So without getting too academic, but I have to get a little academic to put a little science in here. The way that the human brain works is it's a continual conversation. We call it dialogic. There's a dialogue going on all the time. And if you can imagine a human being just outside you saying, you can't do this. Who do you think you are? This is too late. You don't have enough resources. You know why you're afraid? You're afraid because you can't do this. Like, you would know to get away from that person. You would know, like, this is not good for me. This is not helping me. Well, the thing is that those conversations are going on inside people's heads all the time. What a difference it makes when that shifts in the narrative. Instead of, I don't have any resources, the narrative goes something like, yeah, but you're pretty resourceful. You'll be able to figure this out. Like, if you had that friend saying that, you'd start believing in yourself again. Or if somebody was saying to you, like, well, fear doesn't work that way. You get rid of fear by doing the thing. It's not like get rid of the fear and then you'll do the thing. You've got it backwards. So, like, just do it, and eventually the fear will come down. So you can see if you had that kind of friend sort of listening to what you're saying, going, what if we shifted this? Who am I to think I can do this thing? Like, and that's a little complicated one. Sometimes that kind of narrative comes, from being raised by really hardworking parents who maybe didn't get very far. And then having a feeling like, I'd like to get a lot farther. And then there's a feeling like, well, if I do, am I sort of saying what my parents did wasn't enough, or they weren't enough? And there's that's a big one, I think, for entrepreneurs is a feeling of, I would like more, but it's selfish to want more. And if you had a good friend standing there going like, but if you had more, I know the kind of person you are. If you had more, wouldn't you give more? So wouldn't it be nice if you had more so you actually could give more? So there's narrative work, for the most part, is coming up with questions that are better, that are sort of exploratory, that it helps a person kind of uncover the narratives that keep them stuck. That's primarily people know what they need to do, but they aren't doing it because the phrase I use around here a lot is that because the narratives that are undergirding the necessary behavior, they're just not good enough. They're not strong enough. They don't exist. So that all of our work is narrative work. In a nutshell. There you go.
I mean, so what we're talking about here, just to get a little context, is like inner game. It's like,
Yeah.
it's like a lot of people tune into me because they're like, they want to learn marketing, they want to learn how to sell stuff, they want to learn how to launch,
Yeah.
and I'm all about, here's the tactics, here's put this on, boom, 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 and that stuff is important. It's critically important, but to have success as an entrepreneur, especially enduring success, it's all about what's
Right.
going on between your ears.
Yeah,
And
and I would say between years, and it's almost like your whole body. It's like everything. So I would say narrative is a little bigger than mindset, because mindset is sort of, it's a particular thing. Like an abundance mindset is a particular kind of idea, or a growth mindset is a particular idea. But narrative would be like all of those ideas rolled into one. And so part of why people who are successful in a sustainable way, they're always working on narrative, is it's like many things. You get this one sort of unraveled, figured out, you insert a better one, and then you go farther, and then, oh, there's another one right there. Like in that, that happens with, for sure, at the level of business people play at. And you'll hear this all the time. Like people say, well, what I did to get me to this level won't get me to that level. And they always say what I did, but I think it's I think it's what their narrative was, really. But I always think it's good news when it's a narrative problem, because super fixable. Other things less fixable, but like personality, you can't change that much, but narrative, yeah, you can change narrative. So
okay, I want to circle back to fixable in just a moment, but
okay.
before we started record, because I mean that's like the good news is,
Yeah.
but before we started recording, you just riffed off like seemed like a half a dozen or a whole bunch of common narratives that,
Yeah.
let's just
Yeah.
say, might not be serving people.
Yeah. Do you want me to just go through those again?
Yeah.
I'll do this when I have
Just
more
so other people can have the benefit of the conversations that you and I have all the time.
Okay. Well, this is a really common one. I'll do this when I have enough resources. That usually means time and money. But as I said, like if you listen to your story, in your beginnings, you were resourceful. And that's what you will hear if you listen to most people who are successful, is they think a lot about being resourceful, which is different than having all the resources. A lot of people think it's talent and luck, and most people who have gotten to some level of success they'd be very happy to tell you about their effort. Who am I to do this thing? Other people are more educated, they're more advanced. And that might be true. Other people might be more educated, more advanced, but there's always somebody out there who wants the thing that you want to do, and they want it from you because of you. There's something about the way you do it. And I always say, like, it's not your job to tell people you're the one to learn from. It's your job when somebody says, I want to learn from you, to like, well, teach them, coach them, give them something. They've already selected you. So people have that a little backwards. I need this external validation. Like, you just need people who want a thing the way you do it. They want it from you. One of them, a big one, is I'm ashamed of even dreaming this big. Who do I think I am? Why can't I just be satisfied with good home life, decent health, enough money in the bank? And that almost always is implanted. It's I mean, again, that's often parents or teachers or coaches or ministers, somebody teaching you got too big of a head. And there's a difference between being like really egotistic and being able to dream big and being able to have a good vision, a beautiful vision. It's and trying to create a path there. That's phenomenal. Like, more of that is better. That's not really being egotistic, but it gets turned into that. I should be able to do this alone. Good cowboys did it all by themselves. And I was saying to you, like, most people don't know cowboys a lot of them died before they were 30. It was such a hard job. They started when they're 16 and they're gone, you know, 10, 15 years later. Most entrepreneurs, it takes 10 years to get good at something. You start when you're 35 and you're wondering at age 40, why didn't I make it? Like, well, hang on a bit, might take another 5 years to get good at something. So there's I think because being an entrepreneur, being a business owner, I suppose they're like there's a really laid out path if you want to become a surgeon. I mean, you tell me when you want to start, and I'll tell you when you're going to be done, and I'll tell you what you're going to earn by the end of that time frame. But that's not so much, entrepreneurs. Those paths are a little windy, and you're not going to stay on it if you have a lot of head trash. It's just not good.
And it seems like, and the narrative, if you're going to continue to develop as an entrepreneur and continue to grow your business and become a leader for your clients and a leader for your team and a leader for yourself, that your narrative has to evolve. Can we say get better?
Yeah. I think it needs to absolutely get better. And I think probably this is probably a little appreciated narrative shift that is well, and I've heard you say this, so it's part of my attraction to you in your world is you have a big vision for entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are the future of all humanity. That's an impact narrative. And when people believe they can and should and they want to have a big impact, that narrative pulls them through all sorts of like, I don't think I can do this, or who am I to do this? Maybe this is somebody else's work to do. So, around here, we're all about what kind of impact do you want to have? What kind of mark, do you want to make them in your world and on the world? And it's your big why. Some people will say that, some people will say it's purpose, like whatever it is, but that has to be super clear. Maybe a better way to put it is, if the clearer that is, the faster you can get somewhere. When it's foggy, I always say, well, here's the hack on purpose. You're here to love and contribute. So let's get going in, whatever way makes sense. Let's get going. Because you'll find your way. You'll find a particular purpose along the way. I think here's a really typical one. I have a great product or service, but in my market, nobody will pay me a premium price. So it's a lot of work for me to create this thing and deliver it. So I can't get very much money for it. So probably shouldn't do it. They're around the right people. The right people are going to say that's a messaging issue. That's there's probably, if you think it's going to help somebody have a better life, it's like, how do you find the people and then how do you talk with them? That's a messaging thing. There's around here when people will say, I can't, it won't, I'm often going like, it's probably a messaging issue. I almost always think like, but how are you talking with them? Not, it can't be done, or not, that's an impossible dream, or not, you have a ridiculous product. I mean, that's one of the best things about being at your events, you find out somebody's they went from, 8,000 to 80,000, and they just broke 6 figures, and they're selling something you had never even heard of. Like, what is that thing? What does it do? What? So there are markets. It's just a little, can't give up till you find them. You can't give up till you get the right messaging.
Right. And you're not going to have the right messaging unless you have the right messaging going on inside your head.
Yes. Yeah.
Entrepreneurs are the future of all humanity, and I'm here to help entrepreneurs. That came out of a lot of work on my part when I did my first $4 million launch. And, I had very humble beginnings, and no one in my family ever could even think about millions or even hundreds of thousands. And it was like, okay, why am I here? What's this? Why should I keep pushing it? And I remember coming up with that phrase, doing a lot of work, yoga workshops, meditation workshops, going and
Right.
journaling out in the woods, and on and on. It didn't come like that. That narrative took me a while to come up with. I
Yeah.
didn't know you at the time. I wish I had. But when I came up with that, I instantly realized I could see, I guess I was aware enough that I knew that having that narrative gave me permission to go where I needed to go.
Yeah.
And it also helped my narrative, my messaging out into the world too.
Well,
cool
and that
stuff.
that puts you in the framework of selling something as a service to a person too. Like, well, if I'm putting something together and it's going to help humanity, it's better if I sell more of this than if I sell less of this. So how do I figure out how to become better and better and better at understanding what objections people have to purchasing something? And I think, along those lines, probably the narrative shift that would be most useful for entrepreneurs to make around their messaging to anybody that they think what they're delivering is really good for is there's almost this idea that, like, I have to sell my product or me, and I'm like, that's probably not that hard. It's really more like selling the person on their own future and on why they deserve a better future, and why, because you're bringing a product out to people who have the same exact narrative problems. Like, well, who am I to think I could have, like, we call them first class marriage as an example. Who am I to think I can have a life without alcohol and still enjoy it? Everybody else in my family's alcoholic. Like, who am I? Who do I think I am? Who am I to just get in the best shape of my life? I heard you say once that at one point you said, yeah, I started thinking I should weigh what I weighed in high school or when I graduated high school. Like, that's a narrative shift from, think about the typical narrative out there was like, well, you got your little middle-aged belly there, it's all right, that happens when you're 50 or something, versus like, I think why wouldn't I was a healthy weight. I could keep that weight. That's a narrative. That's just a narrative that but that particular narrative, then, like, I'd be healthy if I were my high school weight, creates all sorts of behaviors. So that's what I mean by the narrative that undergirds the tactics. If you believe selling is a service, you know yourself to be a person of service, you're going to sell more, not less. You're going to try to figure out more, you're not going to look at sales as creepy. You're going to look at it as like helping. And the people who in history who were probably best at this are people who are like missionaries and little 4-year-olds, because a 4-year-old, a skilled 4-year-old can get a very skilled adult to behave differently. And if you watch them, you go like, they have a, like, take no prisoners, and they're not going to take no. They're just figuring another way around. Eventually, half the time I cave. I'm like, all right, you got a good point there. But they don't give up on.
Right, and they don't have the mental head trash narrative in place yet. Yeah,
Exactly. So some of what we talk about around here is like uncovering narratives that are keeping you stuck. Almost always, you did not choose them. Almost always, those narratives that keep people stuck were indoctrinated, implanted, not usually by mean people. Just, it was benevolent people who didn't know any better, is what I think it usually is. So
people who are doing the best they could with what they had.
Exactly.
But without intention, usually or often.
Yeah.
So
right. So go ahead.
So narrative work, I imagine, has got to start with identifying the narratives that you have that are not serving. Is that accurate?
It starts with a single. I always think narrative work starts with a particular narrative. And the particular narrative is, I decided. It's a decision. So I decided to get down to my high school weight. I decided to ride a bicycle across America. I decided to open my own business. It always starts with the word. It's a powerful phrase. I decided, partly because the when I say I want a cup of coffee, who, again, I don't want to get too academic, but who's the I in that sentence? Like, that's a big, soulful, dreaming, amazing human being who then has some negative thoughts thrown in the picture and then feels bad and then just gets stuck. So you have to so that's the first one. Is I decided to change my narrative. That's the first one. I decided to start believing that the world is a good world. I decided to start believing it would be interesting to learn marketing, for example. I remember a narrative shift that happened in me really early on in your program. And it's a little embarrassing, but it's just the truth. At one point I went something like, oh, right. People got degrees in marketing. It's an actual discipline. It's a thing I'm going to have to learn. Like, what? Like, yeah, like an academic discipline. There's stuff to learn. So it's embarrassing because I'm a pretty good student, but I didn't think I was going to have to study. Like, oh, I should just be able to do this. Well, why? Why wouldn't you have to take a course and learn a thing or two and get the sideways sales letter sequence committed to memory?
So
no, I didn't do that. Took me a moment.
Well, you got it. You figured it out, and now you're helping so many entrepreneurs change their narratives to more positive ones, so they can just. I mean, the fantasy I've got, and I think it's accurate. It not to diminish your work in any way. It celebrates it, but I think once people get it's like get their narrative fixed. It's like they're getting out of their own way, and all of a sudden. There's still work to be done, but it's just the success flow.
Yeah. So, well, I think like there's a narrative shift around. So this is something somebody said the other day, and she said, "I realize that I'm still doing a lot of work, but I'm not suffering." And she said that was a narrative shift. I'm working hard, but I'm not suffering while I'm working hard. And she said that was just a narrative shift that happened because I made a decision to stop acting like I'm suffering because I'm doing marketing work. And that was an interesting thing. It was just like, I recognized that myself. And I went, I'm not suffering. Okay. And then all of a sudden she said, I'm still working, but easy now. So, narrative shifting for the win is how I think about it. But it's hard to uncover them. That's the tricky part.
And so I just want to come back. I just want to come back to that's fixable.
Yeah.
And talk a little bit about how and what's that process.
So our method on that is making sure that people get the right science. Like, it's a science finding that fear goes away after you do the things you're afraid of. Like, just get them the right content and then get people journaling. It's very hard to fix something inside your head. I usually say, you can't sort laundry in the laundry basket. So let's dump it out and then we'll sort it. So journaling around the particular content that they're learning. And then we have them go into breakout rooms where they're equipped with, I just call it like dialogical tools. They're not that complicated, but people want to give advice. They just want to give advice. That doesn't tend to help anybody shift their narrative. What tends to help people shift their narratives are better questions. So we spend a lot of time helping people to take responsibility themselves if they're putting something out there, but like doing it in a way where there's a tenderness around asking good questions. And we have a whole like cultural thing to do that. And then Q&A, and then we do that kind of over and over and over. I mean, for transformation, you generally need a year. You can get tactical stuff done in shorter amounts of time, but if you're really trying to have an enduring change, pretty much, you're looking at a year for most people. Not because it takes 40 hours a week every week, but people, you know, you need to try an idea on a little bit, put it down, bring it back, get your own validation going. And usually the sequence that works is for, and this is not where anybody wants to start, I guarantee you. Most people come into the world, in our world, and they would like to earn more money. Yay, me too. I'm all for that. So you would think, well, we're going to talk to them about money goals and strategies and tactics, and we don't. We just start with everybody with the same narrative process. And the first thing we do is see how they're sleeping. Are you sleeping? Yeah, I'm trying to earn, I can't, I'm trying to earn some money. Like, you're going to burn yourself out. So like so we actually work with them on first sleep, wind down routine, and then a wind up routine. What's your morning routine like? Like you have a, like your morning and your morning routine in particular, I've heard about that. Like that's sacred territory for you. And, you know, people probably do not get the power of that in driving your business, but it does. So we have people do, I mean, we suggest that they think about how do they wind down and wind up intellectually, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And more often than not, it's the spiritual part of that that needs a bit of a reboot. So when we sort of get that going, those routines going, we call that getting above the line. Once they get above the line, then okay, they're working, they want money, and then we go like, how are things with the kids? Because if anything goes wrong with somebody's child, it pulls them off everything. So that, then what about the marriage? Like how, so the next thing we work on, like super solid relationship skills, not particular to any particular relationship. We just teach them the science of relationships and have them work through narratives. And many people really quietly and tenderly sort of, you know, they discover a thing or two that they picked up from a favorite teacher or a parent or somebody it's just not serving them or anybody else. And they have to say goodbye to that. And then now we get into contribution, which is, right, what kind of money are you making? What kind of money do you want to make? What kind of value do you want to bring to the world? How come, is there a way for you to get a promotion, to get more, can you add more value at work? Or I mean, I have to admit, I'm a little biased. I feel a little bad for people. I kind of want them to become entrepreneurs. I just think it's such a good path. But we don't say you have to become one. We just say, like, you could become a little more entrepreneurial at work. That will make, you know, that's going to add value. Usually, it depends on who you're working for. But, and then out of that, suddenly they feel like they're on purpose again and they're living. So we have a sort of a 4 broad steps, like getting above the line, getting your love life in order, getting your money in order, and then sort of voila, you're making an impact now. And then you get to shift it. Like, I might be making an impact, but I would rather make it by, you know, some other cause that's important to them. Sometimes people work on that directly, or sometimes they just earn more money and give money to the cause. Anyway, it's not as probably sounds more complicated when I'm talking about it, but it's a relatively straightforward map that works because it actually maps exactly how human beings move forward. I mean, you can look at a little kid, they're interested in both building a Lego thing and sitting on your lap. And when they're tired of sitting on your lap, they go build the thing. They just go back and forth between the being and the doing world. So getting a balance, but they have to feel that connection first. So we make sure that people are healthy, get connected, and then we'll see what contribution is going to look like.
Yep. One thing I love about you, Julie, and we'll wrap this up here. Thank you so much for coming on. Is
Happy to.
Yeah, it's like, is you, not everything is scientific, not all wisdom and knowledge is science, or the answer to everything isn't science, but that you always defer to science when you can, when it applies, that you're very science-based. Very cool.
I think it gives me confidence. Like this is looking like this is a way to do it. Anybody got any sense? Oh yeah, it turns out that's going to work. So yeah.
Hmm.
But it doesn't, it doesn't take the place of faith. It doesn't take the place of where your spirit is taking you and paying attention to that. Yeah.
Julie, thanks so much. You've helped so many people in my community. Really appreciate it. And
Yeah. It's a great community to be a part of. I feel very honored, really, that I like being here. It's a good community.
thank you.
Thank you.